So very good afternoon once again, friends, and thank you for joining in on a Sunday. Our usual preliminaries in terms of welcome. And again, as I was mentioning, stamina and enthusiasm for learning the Gita. So we will proceed on this journey together. Today we are in the fourth interaction where we will be covering the Gita through 90 shlokas. So purely as understanding of where we are, we have completed 25 shlokas so far, and all of them have been in the area of Jnana Yoga, various aspects of Jnana Yoga as we have seen. Those detailed aspects are in terms of what you can see in the chart here. So Atma knowledge, then Sthita Pragya, then Indriya Nigraha, then Paramashanti, and the Self and the Brahman, which is what we had discussed last week. And we have also discussed a few shlokas from the sixth topic, which is the Trigunas and Prakriti, which is nature. We have just one more shloka to do from the Prakriti and the Trigunas, and thereafter we have the ethical teachings, which we will be putting together all as a part of the sub-theme of Jnana Yoga. So purely in terms of recap, this is what we did last week. So Sattvat Sanjayate Jnanam Rajaso Lobha Evacha Pramada Moho Tamaso Bhavato Jnanam Evacha, which is, I will not go into the detailed explanation because we did that last week. This is just for us to have a continuity of the topic. So from Sattva, knowledge is born. From Rajas, greed is born. And negligence and delusion are the products of Tamas, as also ignorance. Then we have the next shloka, Manapamanayo Stulyas Tulyo Mitra Ripakshayo Sarvarambha Parityagi Gunatita Sauchyate, which is to whom honor and insult, the faction of his friends and faction of his enemies are equal, who is steadfast in a wise and imperturbable and immutable inner calm and quietude, who initiates no action but leaves all works to be done by the gunas of nature, he is said to be above the gunas. So again, we had a discussion on the whole concept of gunatit here, which hopefully we have in our mind. Then we have the famous black hole analogy, but not really so. I'm just picking up from what was one of the comments. So here there is the statement that na tad bhasayate suryo na shashanko na pavaka yad gatva na nivartante tad dhama paramam mama, which is that we find the timeless being which is not illumined by the sun or the fire or the moon. And having gone there, we do not return. That is the highest eternal status of my being. This, of course, being the language of Krishna. So he talks about himself being the eternal being. In fact, one of the shlokas we're going to be doing today would be about this very aspect. Then 15.7 is an important shloka, as I said. Mame vansho jivaluke jiva bhuta sanatana manashasthani indriyani prakritisthani karshati, which is that an eternal portion of the Paramatma, that is me, becomes a jiva in the world of the living creatures and cultivates the subjective powers of Prakriti, mind and the five senses, so that jiva is a combination of these other attributes also. And of course, it is the amsha of the Paramatma. Then we have a very major statement that very Paramatma, the Atma that's there within you is Sarvasya Chaham Hridi Sanni Vishto Matha Smriti Jnana Pohanam Cha Vedesha Sarve Rahameva Vedyo Vedanta Krit Veda Videva Chaham, which is I am lodged in the hearts of all. From me are memory and knowledge and their absence. And what is known by all the Vedas, I am, which is of course the Lord Krishna. And indeed, I am the knower of the Vedas and the maker of Vedanta. So all the aspects of the world in reality, as well as the knowledge behind the world, is all the fruit of the presence of the Paramatma. So that's where we had concluded last week. And now let's proceed to the shloka for this week, which is 26. So this is the last, if you recall, of the shlokas of the gunas and three nature. This is, in fact, the most interesting of all the shlokas. So let me chant it first, and then we'll go through the detailed understanding. Yasmat ksharamati ksharaadapi chottamaha atosmi loke Vede cha pratitah Purushottamah. So the Anvaya, which is the prose reordering, is Yasmat Aham Ksharam. Yasmat is just like Aham. Aham is, of course, the supreme. Ksharam. It is beyond the Kshara. Kshara is that which decays. Then that is the first clause. The second phrase is Aksharat api uttamaha. Okay. And so this is Kshara which decays. Akshara is that which does not decay. So this is also beyond the Akshara. Akshara api uttamaha. Okay. So there are two qualities. One, it is beyond the mutable or the decaying, and it is beyond the immutable or the non-decaying also. Cha atah loke vede cha purushottama iti pratitah asmi. So what this means is that loke, in this world, vede, in the Vedas, this is called purushottama iti pratitah asmi. You know, it is proclaimed as, so the entity which is beyond the kshara, and the entity which is beyond the akshara, and the entity which, obviously, the world and the Vedas are all a part of the kshara and akshara, which is beyond all that, is called purushottama. Now, this is one of the significant original contributions of the Gita. To understand this, I've created a chart because it becomes a little difficult to conceive this. So, Kshara Purusha is the Jiva. Akshara Purusha is the Jivatma. Okay. And then the Purushottama is the Paramatma or the Brahman. So the Jiva is obviously something where you have your manas and buddhi and all that you have inherited. So it is the Jiva, that is your Atma plus your buddhi, your samskaras, which travels from one body to the other when the body dies. So this is the one that travels from body to body, carrying your samskaras and your karma. Yeah, we are speaking about karma to be done. So karma, whatever you do in terms of its impact on you, the jiva carries. Now the jivatma, that is jiv mein jo atma hai, usko jivatma bolte hain. So this is the one that witnesses without attachment and actions the thoughts of an individual. So this is the core. So jiv ke beech mein jo center hai, usko jivatma bolte hain, or it can also be called as atman and sakshi. So it is around this that your samskaras and karma, when around the jivatma, the samskaras and karmas come, it becomes the jiva. Right? So these are all a little bit of terminology which we need to understand. And Paramatma is universal consciousness. So it is an entity which is behind both the Akshara Purusha and the Kshara Purusha. So this is the unique contribution of the Bhagavad Gita, because such a clear explanation of three entities was not given. It was hinted at, but was not clarified with terminology. So the terminology of the Bhagavad Gita here very clearly states that there are three kinds of Purushas. One is Purushottama, which is behind everything. One is Akshara Purusha, which is the Jivatma. And the other is a Kshara Purusha, which is the Jiva. And we need to understand the definitions given in the three boxes here to understand the difference. So I will repeat. The Jiva is what travels from one body to the other, carrying the qualities of your manas and karma. Then the Akshara Purusha is the Atman within you. And it is also called, since the Atman is within the Jiva, it is called Jivatma. So just we understand that Akshara Purusha, just purely in terms of terminology, is the Atman. And since that Atman is found in the Jiva, it is called Jivatman. That's the terminology used. It's also Sakshi. It is that which does not change, and Purushottama is the supreme that is behind all this. So each sampradaya in India will claim that the Purushottama is their own deity. For example, in ISKCON, it will be said that Sri Krishna is Purushottama. Among the Shaivites, they will say Lord Shiva is Purushottama. Among the Shakti Upasakas, they will say Shakti is, Purushottama or Purushottami, there's no equivalent term as such, but she is a Mahashakti. So we will find, therefore, a lot of conceptual similarity, but in terms of who the Purushottama is, that is where the schools may differ in terms of naming the Purushottama. Okay, Now let's look at 27, 28, and 29. And these are relatively easier to understand because these are the ethical teachings of the Gita. Yeah, Vishwarup, you just need to mute your phone, please, or your laptop.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, okay. So till 26, we have been actually looking at gunas and nature. And just to go back so that we understand, this is the last shloka that we have in the gunas and nature. And it is a kind of wrapping up shloka where it uh, takes into account the rajas and the tamas and the sattva, as well as the definitions of kshara purusha, akshara purusha, and purushottama. So with that, the line item is closed. The three gunas and nature line item is closed. Now we come to the ethical teachings, which are not that difficult as these are. So the ethical teaching is, of course, a part of the 17th chapter, which is the second last chapter. So there's a kind of practicality that we will find as we are moving towards the closure of the Gita, because all the conceptual underpinnings have been clarified, and therefore the practical elements are now being put across to Arjuna by Lord Krishna. So what he says is Deva Dvij Guru Pragya Pujanam Shaucham Arjavam Brahmacharya Ahimsa Cha Shariram Tapa Uchyate. So he is describing here what is called Sharirik Tapa. Okay, so let's look at the Anvaya. Deva Dvij Guru Pragya Pujanam Shaucham Arjavam Brahmacharyam Ahimsa Cha Shariram Tapa Uchyate. More or less, the poetic rendering and the Anvaya are in fact just the same. One of the unique uh, shlokas where there is actually a poetic sentence that has been constructed. So worship to the Godhead, to the twice born, to the spiritual guide, to the wise, cleanliness, candid dealing, sexual purity, avoidance of killing, injury to others are called ascesis. Ascesis is a term that is used in very, very technical English. I mean, technical in the sense, technical to the terms of spirituality, which means tapasya. So in Hindi, we have this as Devata Dvij Guru और ज्ञानी की पूजा और आदर करना, स्वच्छता, सरल व्यवहार, ब्रह्मचर्य का पालन और दूसरों की हिंसा न करना, ये सब शारीरिक तप कहते हैं. So let us understand this from a slightly more modern perspective, okay, or a more interpretative perspective. So this is called austerity of the body. Now we will try to figure out what we mean. Now, non-injury, we understand it is to prevent your body from being used to harm others. Brahmacharya, we understand because obviously sex and sexual purity emerges from the body. Arjava, which is one of the terms used there, So, Shaucham Arjavam, you can see that. Arjava means faithful to one's conscience. Now, this is more in the mind. Shaucha can be obviously cleanliness of the body and cleanliness of the mind. Then Pragya, Guru, Dvija. Okay, these are terms which are typically in the olden days. One may say your austerity of the body means you do Sashtang Pranam to these three categories of people. So it may not, so it is in that sense that it is under the austerity of the body. And Deva is, of course, you have a Devki Murti, so you do a Namaskar. And that is how these are logically classified under austerity of the body. But they could, if you look at the modern interpretation that I have on the right column, so Dvija is traditionally referred to a Brahmin, but in modern times, any spiritual practitioner, anyone who is spiritually elevated, irrespective of the background, he would be deemed to be a Dvija. Now, it's not that you go into namaskar to them, it's that you show your reverence to them by understanding. So in these three cases, the Dvija, the Guru, and the Pragya, yeah, Guru still in the Indian tradition, you may go and do a namaskar, but for the Dvija and the Pragya, you may actually show them respect. So more likely that purely as a classification, it can move into austerity of the mind, which is what will come next. And Deva, of course, again, it can be austerity of the mind, because nobody is asking you to go to a temple and do namaskar to the Deva Murti there. But if you have the ideal of best service to people, of your greatest professionalism, all those are higher ideals of the world. Contributing what I can to help people who don't have sufficient funds. All that are higher ideals, and therefore, again, more to be classified under austerity of the mind. The reason why I'm saying austerity of the mind is there are three kinds of austerities that have been spoken about in the ethical teachings. If you recall, we said there are four ethical shlokas, or four teachings of ethical perspectives from the Gita, and they talk about the body, the mind, and speech. So in body, we find that there are some which could well have been put in mind itself. But the older ancient logic of putting it in the body is what I've tried to explain. And the right hand column explains to you why it could well fit in the mind. But what we need to keep in mind is that these are for us to follow irrespective of classification. And therefore, these are good ethical behavior patterns that we can absorb. Now, this is the next one. Anudvega karam vakyam satyam priyahitam chayat swadhyaya bhyasanam chaiva vangmaya tapa uchyate. Vangmaya is vak, so speech. So I spoke about the second category where you need to exercise ethical control, you need to exercise self-control. So what do we do as a consequence of having tapa or vangmaya? Anudvegakaram, that speech that causes no trouble to others. Satyam, true. Priyahitam, kind and beneficial. Swadhyaya, Swadhyaya Bhyasanam. So study of the scripture. Now, study of the scripture traditionally meant chanting the Vedas, and therefore it comes under Vangmaya. But now it may be simply study, which is a silent study. So coming to the explanation for this, Anudvegakara is without excitement. So this is all austerity of speech. So Anudvegakara. So Vegakara is, Vega is speed. So anything that increases the momentum, the agitation of your mind, that kind of speech is Vegakara. And Anudvegakara is that which does not cause that kind of increased momentum, increased reaction patterns from your own mind or in someone else's mind when you speak. So without excitement, non-impulsive speech that emanates from thought, reflection, and judgment. Satya. Obviously, Satya is at the tip of your tongue, and what you say can be truthful, faithful, and precise statement of facts without bias and prejudice. Then Priya, pleasant speech, speech free from ego and selfish motive. Hita, beneficial speech directed to a higher cause in the best interest of all. Now, of course, Swadhyaya. So Swadhyaya, if it is taken to mean chanting, then obviously it is under austerity of speech. But if it is taken to be self-study, as we have defined here, then it can be taken to be a part of the austerity of the mind, which is going to be the next shloka. So just to kind of summarize, we have looked at austerity of the body, where some elements are truly a part of austerity of the body even now, but the others can be put under austerity of the mind. Then we have austerity of speech, where one element can be put in the category of austerity of the mind. So the shloka that is left for us to understand is this shloka. Manah prasada saumyatvam maunamatma vinigraha bhava samshuddhirit yetat tapo manasam uchyate. So manah prasada, clear and calm mind, saumyatvam, gentleness, maunam, silence, atma vinigraha, which is self-control, bhava samshuddhi, iti etat manasam tapa uchyate. So these are all called manasika tapa. Of course, maunam, you may say, is a combination of manasika tapa as well as vak tapa, austerity of speech. So coming to the classification, so this is austerity of the mind. The manah prasada is obviously austerity of the mind, where you have a calm mind because your meditation, your wisdom and understanding. Saumyatva. Now, Saumyatva is when you have a calm mind, then your face is also pleasant. You are gentle in disposition, soothing. Mauna is obviously from the mind, but obviously can also be put under speech. So Mauna is holding your speech, restraining your speech, and keeping quiet and not unnecessary. So Anudvekakaram and Mauna are more or less similar. Atma Vinigraha starts with the mind and obviously extends to the speech and extends to the body also. So if you look at ahimsa, if we look at brahmacharya, if we look at these two factors at least, they are dependent upon the body obeying the mind. So we can see that austerity of the body, austerity of speech, austerity of mind are enumeration of some qualities that we need to have. Now we can get to be pedantic by trying to, criticize the head under which it is classified. But if the three shlokas are read together and the classification broadly is understood that we need to have purity of the body, purity of speech, and purity of the mind. Now, this is called an ethical teaching because whether you believe in Krishna or whether you believe in Shakti or whether you believe in Shiva, as a human being, these qualities all represent the fact that whichever divine deity you believe in, the divine deity's energy is flowing through you through these very qualities. And therefore, the Purushottama need not matter, but your own behavior along these three qualities or three shlokas and the group of qualities would be of great value and would improve your interaction levels with society as well as improve your relationships with the people around you within your family. Because if you just think of all this and think of the teams that you have worked in, think of the friends that you had with whom you may have had some difference of opinion and then maybe you split up or something. When you think of all the unpleasant or not so excellent experiences of yours in human relations, you would find that they are somehow tagged to one or more of these qualities, which is broadly classified under I need to hold my tongue, I need to control my mind, and I need to control my body. Now, I'll give you a very modern example of controlling the body, and you can appreciate this. So, austerity of the body, we have a concept called personal space. So, personal space means there's a certain bubble that we have around ourselves, and the moment somebody penetrates through that invisible bubble, we draw back. Especially when it comes in organizations, especially in MNCs where I have worked, people are very, very particular about their personal space, and you cannot simply go and touch people on their back and say hello to them, which you may do as very close friends. Especially when it comes to the other gender, typically, unwanted, backslapping or hugging is all deemed to be a part of you having overstepped the body bubble. And therefore, austerity of the body has obviously an interpretation which is non-injury to someone else's body bubble. And we understand this. And many a times there are so many cases where women have filed complaints of harassment based on inappropriate, touching their bodies by their male colleagues. So just to give a simple example that, so I will now upgrade here so that we have a full recording. So just a minute. Oh, save and continue. 1 minute. So are you able to see this? Are you able to see the presentation now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just load it back. Okay. So I think our meeting time still remains 9 minutes. I think let me handle that. Okay. Um, so I was explaining the meaning of austerity of body, austerity of mind, of speech, and austerity of mind. Let me come to the last shloka for the day. We have 5 minutes left before we can actually, or even more time. We have 10 minutes left. So the last one is an important shloka in the sense that it is one of the shlokas that speaks about the importance of Om. So I will chant the shloka Om Tat Saditi Nirdesho Brahmanas Trividha Smritaha Brahmanastena Vedascha Yagyascha Vihita Pura. So Om Tat Sat Iti Brahmanah Trividha Nirdesha Smritaha Tena Brahmana Vedacha Yagyacha Pura Vihita. So Om Tat Sat is a formulation, or it's a three-word formulation which represents, which is a threefold definition of Purushottama, or Brahman, which we had spoken about in the earlier shloka. So Brahmanas are of course texts which are commenting on the Veda as well as the Vedas themselves. So this is all explained or understood when you understand Om is the overall meaning of the shloka. So how do you understand Om? I have a chart here which looks at, so you can say U, and I'm sure that all of you have been through some kind of explanation of yoga. And when you say Om together, that is a fourth one called Turiya. So purely in terms of looking at the facet you're meditating on, we can see that there are different concepts, which get covered and realized when you chant Om. So you can chant Om as or you can chant as Om. When you chant as Om, you get the benefit of all the three. When you chant as and starting from the base of your abdomen, going up to the chest, and then going to the throat, you get the benefit of a deeper penetration into the concepts and intuitive understanding of the various aspects that are mentioned. So here I've only mentioned samsara, shakti, functions of Trimurti, reality, two facets of reality. But from the book that I had, there are no less than 108 different ways to split up the Om formula. And the only practical, now we spoke about practical wisdom of the Gita, that has been the whole purport. You can see that the last three shlokas were all very practical. So what is the practicality we derive from this shloka would be the question, because all this may sound to be metaphysical in terms of its concept and in terms of its absorption and understanding. So the very simple formulation which is of practical utility for us is the chanting of Om. Now there are numerous studies that have been conducted where electroencephalograms have been hooked to the brain, to the skull, and therefore looking at the brain impulses. Functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, has been done. And they have also monitored the blood pressure and the skin resistance. And they have compared the chant of Om to chant of one chant. In the Chinese system, they have a chant called the six sounds. Sh, and they have six such sounds. So numerous studies have been conducted, and these numerous studies have found that Om has this inexplicable quality of generating peace of mind, generating more neural connections, as well as reducing the neural activity, of reducing the blood pressure, of giving a sense of calm. So I personally chant, Om for at least 10 minutes every day. Before I chant anything else, I chant the Gayatri for 10 minutes. So 10 minutes of Om chanting. You can do it loudly, you can do it quietly, you can do it in your mind. As they say, Vachika Upamshu is just saying it loud. Oh, Vachika is loudly. Upamshu is to chant it so that only you can hear it. That is, it is basically chanting through the lips. Upa Amshu. Then manasika, which is through your mind, just chanting quietly. So that is something which does not require any initiation. And these studies indicate that as you keep chanting on a daily basis, first start with 5 minutes. You don't need any mala or you don't need anything at all. Just close your eyes, and after you brushed your teeth, and you can kind of sit back and chant Om for 5 minutes, increase it to 10 minutes. I think 10 minutes a day, concentrated chanting. In about 10 minutes, you can easily chant about 1,000 Oms. Okay, that's my experience, because if you take a japamala and move it very fast, you can chant one japamala of 108 in 10 minutes. So 108 into 10, I mean in 1 minute. So in 10 minutes you can chant 1080 Om. You will find the impact starting to manifest after about a week or so. You will find your understanding of things becomes a little more refined. You become a little more calmer, and all the things that we think are very difficult, when the Gita says it is difficult, you need to do this, you need to do that, you find those things happening to you inexplicably, and you will be getting transformed. So I don't know how many of you actually do chant Om, but my strong recommendation based on personal experience is that it should be something that you do. So this is the last of the 5 shlokas that we have for today. And therefore, I'm going to stop the share and look at the questions. Listening to Om has any good or not? Yes, listening to Om, you see, nothing like, it's like saying, if I look at Rasgulla, will I get the taste of Rasgulla? No, you have to eat the Rasgulla. So my recommendation is you should chant, Om chant karne mein kitna time lagta hai. And the question of mispronouncing Om does not arise at all. There is nobody you can mispronounce a Vedic, because you got the swaras, you got the correct pronunciation, you got to do a lot of things in terms of practice for chanting the Vedas properly. But Om is the essence of the Vedas. So you don't have, and I don't think, I am yet to find a person who can say, I don't know how to pronounce Om. Because Om is such a basic sound. It starts from the base of your throat and ends with your lips closing. So Ma, all of us know how to say Ma because we have said that. So Om, it's not difficult at all. So my suggestion is, don't listen to it. Eat the Rasgulla by chanting at least 5 minutes. Okay. So whom do I answer first? I'll answer Deepak. Sakshi Bhav is the witness that you have. For example, if you say that I slept well last night, if you sleep well, then it means that your buddhi and manas and your senses are all shut off, because you can't see, you can't. Then how do you know that you slept well? Who observes that you slept well? So that is the Atma within you. The Atma within you is telling you that in spite of your body not moving, your senses, your indriya not operating, your manas, your subconscious may be working, but only involuntary functions, your buddhi not working, yet you know that you slept well. So जो आपका जो है अंतर्यामी जिसको बोलते हैं, that is called Sakshi. I hope that makes sense, Deepak. Deepak ji? Where is Deepak? Yes.
Yes. It's okay now.
Okay. So let me take the discussion further. Yeah, Sunil, you had a question? Sunil Rastogi?
No, I had written in the chat.
Oh, because I have lost the chat, when you start the, yeah.
So this is a Purusha. It has been used with the Char and Achar.
Correct.
So what is that Purusha? Purushotma is a Purusho mein Uttam. Purush is a...
So Purush is a term. It is not to be understood as a human being at all. So Purush is a term, which means that so the term is used for anything which has got intelligence. Okay. So there are three. So there are 3 categories of intelligence. One is the Jiva, one is the Jivatma, and other is un sabka boss, which is Purushottama. Okay, so Jiva is your Atma plus your Buddhi and your Manas. Okay.
For them it is used
so
as
you
a
can
Purush.
imagine. And then your Jivatma is just the Atman, and this Atman which is there is a part of the bigger fabric of Atma. So so you can say that if I have a screen, that big screen is, let us say, the Purushottama. If I cut a small part of the screen and hold it in front of me, that is a Jivatma.
Atma.
And whatever color I find on that screen is the Jiva. So you and me are different Jivas, but we are same Jivatma, and all Jivatmas are a part of Paramatma. Is that okay?
Jiva is not the human body.
So Jiva is there in the human body. So when the body dies, जब आपका शरीर और इंद्रिय और प्राण खत्म हो जाता है, तो जो बचता है आत्मा, बुद्धि और मनस, but without the memory of the body, because body is gone. So this entity is called Jiva. इसमें जो आत्मा बैठा है, that is called Jivatma. For whatever reason, it's a slightly.
Jiva is a subset of Jivatma.
Yes, correct.
Jivatma is a subset of Jiva.
So that will not confuse. Forget about the linguistic gymnastics.
Yeah. Second
Correct.
is Om and Om. Yeah, please.
Correct.
Please.
So it's like this, that Purushottama is a superset, then Jivatma is the subset, and Jiva is the subset of Jivatma.
Then Om and A, O, M, Ma. Is there a difference in pronunciation? And why so? मतलब जब उसका करते हैं A, O, this is a breathing exercise, a sort of thing. When we say A, O, M, Ma.
So I will explain to you what happens. So A is A, U is U, Ma is Ma. So when you pronounce A, जब उसको दीर्घ करते हैं या प्लुता करते हैं, प्लुता means उसकी मात्रा को बढ़ाते हैं. मात्रा is timing. So A you can chant. Then U you can chant. Syllable. Now in Sanskrit Sandhi, A और U की जो संधि होती है उससे O होता है. So इसलिए when you want, or Ma does not change at all. So A, U और Ma को जब मिलाते हैं तो Om बन जाता है. Purely on the rules of linguistics.
So what is the right way of pronunciation?
Om, so say
Om or A, O.
Om is right. That is, all the three are right. You can say U, because these are three syllables. It's like saying, so your name is Sunil. So should I call you Sunila or should I call you Sunil? So if I call you just Su, it is not enough. If I call you just Ni, it is not enough. If I call you it's not enough. So your name has got three aksharas. I mean, this is akshara in the linguistic sense. So in your case, there is no sandhi. Su, Ni, La will be Sunil. But A, U, Ma will be Om. Because A और U का जो linguistic जो संधि होता है, उससे Om बनता है. O बनता है. और जो Ma है, वो Ma just remains as Ma. So O. So my recommendation to you is, you just chant for 1 week, you will be able to intuitively understand better. इसको जो है cognitively समझना थोड़ा मुश्किल है. उसका experience होना, it is just like trying to explain to you how sweet is rasgulla. अरे, how can I explain how sweet is rasgulla? unless you eat rasgulla. Yes, correct.
In fact,
So
my
my
yoga
recommendation.
instructor,
Ah,
has said that you should pronounce like like that.
no, that is okay. That is not. That is the basic pronunciation. Om is not incorrect at all. So therefore, your yoga instructor has purely when you take it to be breathing, you can say which is perfectly right. So you see, we need to understand that there are numerous angles to understanding. See, as we go through the commentary, I'll just come to you, Sunilji. Just let me just complete this one explanation.
I have one comment
So,
here. So you complete. I have one comment on Om itself.
oh, sure. Okay. So the point that we learn is that usually when we have a yoga teacher or we have a teacher who's teaching us something, that teacher will teach one aspect because the student cannot be confused with multiple thoughts. But what I am doing here is I am giving you all the multiple thoughts and saying that all of them are aspects of understanding. There is no right and wrong. There's nothing which is
Yeah.
grossly wrong. That is the point that I'm trying to make. So over to Sunilji for his thoughts.
Yeah, actually, I have worked a little bit on this pronunciation of Om along with how come it is also related to treatment of certain diseases.
Yes.
For example,
Okay.
you told about that Om has these three sounds of A, U, and Ma, which may be pronounced the way Om is fully pronounced. But I went through the Vedas and learned what is written there. I found some references of even the fourth thing, which is silence. After Om, there is the importance of that silence period also. So A, U, M, and followed by silence. So there are actually 4 syllables in Om. 3 of which are clear, A, U, and Ma sound. And like you said in your presentation, that it starts from the abdomen, then chest, and then our throat. So we can have sometimes while pronouncing Om, we can give thrust to whatever area we want direct benefit. For example, if we have some abdomen problem, we can give more timing to the part A. Problems related to chest, we can give more time to part U. And if we have problems related to our skull and throat, then we can give more time to Ma sound. So I have also made certain videos regarding it. I'll share it with you. How the Om sound can be in different forms, where Ma is of longer duration, U is of longer duration, or Ma is of longer duration, and then followed by silence of longer duration. So there is science behind this, and it is also written at many places. There are 4 or 5 references of Om in Veda. So I'll give those references also. Okay. So it's quite interesting actually.
So as usual, I have a book which I'll share with you.
Yeah.
Are you able to see the book?
Yeah.
Yeah, Om Mala.
Okay. So this gentleman has given 108 different meanings of Om. I'll tell you, I'll just read a few of them. Om is, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Om is the 3 lokas. Om is Father, Mother, and Guru. Om is the 3 Vedas. Om is the 3 strides of Vishnu. Om is, Balarama, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and Krishna. Om is Vishnu, Lakshmi. Om is silence. Om is beginning. And each one of them, he has a reference to our scriptures. Right. So this is, so what I do is, this is something interesting which I have kind of developed. See, when you chant any mantra, uske piche jo bhav hai is very important. See, one is the sound of the mantra itself, or uske piche jo bhav hai, the idea. You must also try to have that in mind when you chant. So since there are 108 meanings that are given, 108 different interpretations of Om, so every day I pick one interpretation and I keep that in mind when I chant. so therefore, over a period of 108 days, doing 1,000 times has got its own benefit, boss. I'm telling you, इसका बहुत जबरदस्त benefit है. and it actually gives you tremendous peace of mind, and tremendous stability. You know, आपका anchoring हो जाता है, आप किसी से नहीं डरोगे. That is the strong thing of Om. And just to answer Deepak, Sakshi Bhav, see, when you keep chanting Deepak, what happens is Sakshi Bhav अपने आप धीरे धीरे develop होता है. इसमें कोई formula नहीं है कि भाई मैं, you know, all your sadhana slowly helps develop the Sakshi Bhav, which means आप आत्मा का साक्षात्कार करते हैं. That's the terminology used. तो जो आत्मा से साक्षात्कार होता है, तो वो आत्मा आपका साक्षी और बनता है. तो इसका ये मतलब होता है कि your conscience, you know, purely in English, your conscience, if you start listening to, then it becomes stronger. This is how it is explained in English. So we need to have some sadhana, because the whole purpose of yoga is आपका जो योग है वो आत्मा का परमात्मा के साथ होता है, और उसको करने के लिए you need to have your atma in full energy. Now the more you have your, you know, kleshas, you have your dukha, you have all that, तो आपका आत्मा जो है वो तेजोमय नहीं होता. You know, it is not giving the brilliance. I hope the Hindi phrase is actually more powerful. उसमें तेज होता है लेकिन वो तेजोमय नहीं हो पाता है, because it is covered by all your you know, bad qualities, all your, you know, karma bandhan and all that kind of stuff. So I'll just stop here for a moment. We still have 8 minutes more. So Deepak ji, tell me, so now I think I must come to Vishwaroop. Yeah, Deepak. Yeah, just want to check with you before Vishwaroop. Is it okay? Has this made sense to you, Deepak?
Okay, very correct now. Clear now.
Yeah. So Vishwaroop, over to you.
Actually, Raj, you have told, you are telling a very interesting thing. Actually, on this subject also, a little bit of study has been done. The issue is Paramatma has three big qualities: Sat, Chit, Anand, and Sat relates to external life, and what we have to do is we have to devote ourselves to external life. That it is done through non-violence, and non-violence is a movement which brings us towards from a relation, that body to our soul relation. And what you have told is the path we need to follow, as you rightly said: calmness, gentleness, silence, self-restraint. These are all the qualities which will make us move towards that, from the body sense to soul sense in us, which is a very difficult path, which you rightly said. This is what a little bit of things which I am able to relate to what I had read and what you have told. So correct me if I am wrong.
No, you're not wrong at all. So you're perfectly right in having analyzed what I have said, because I have also picked up what I have said from personal experience as well as the commentaries. So my only one submission to the group here is that, see, we can talk endlessly, but the actual practice is to chant Om. If you chant Om every day, automatically in 1 month's time, I guarantee you'll find some difference. Right? So the thing is that to sit down and chant Om, we don't find time. That is the whole problem, right? Because we'll find that if you want to sit down to chant Om, initially you'll find you cannot chant Om even for 3 minutes, because your mind keeps running here and there. So it takes a certain amount of practice, but I mean, it is the experience of the entire spiritual fraternity of India, the spiritual lineage of India, all the rishis and munis of India, all the scientists who have worked on this in India, that you know what Ramakrishna Paramhamsa says? He says, your, you know, Sandhya Vandhan, which you are supposed to do in the evening, merges in the Gayatri. Gayatri merges in Om. So Om is the end substance of everything that you do. And therefore, chanting Om is very universal. It does not need any initiation, and it is the easiest thing to do. And therefore, my humble submission to everyone in the group, since you are so fortunate, to be a part of the group where we are discussing the meaning of Om, please put it into practice. So next week when we meet, maybe we can share what our experience has been. Success or failure is not the point, because we have to start somewhere. So Gita becomes practical only when we chant Om, at least for 10 minutes every day. Otherwise, Gita is, hearing from here, and whether it stays inside or not. So Gita, so the Om is a kind of magnet which you're building within you. As you keep chanting Om, the resonance of Om within you is able to attract the knowledge within you. And therefore, your knowledge does not leak out. Your knowledge remains with you. Because our greatest challenge is not understanding, is remembering what we have understood so that it guides our life. So that remembrance is magnetized and energized by the chanting of Om. This is my experience. So therefore, I can only say that I'm sure, especially when, Sunil spoke about his yoga teacher saying, U, and Ma, it is a way to ensure that the yogic posture that you do has got greater impact, right? So it enhances the impact of the yogic posture. And therefore, the yogic teacher is very, very right in recommending the chant during certain postures. So Sunil can explain a little more about the context in which your yoga teacher recommends the chanting of Om.
When we were starting, just he insisted upon that you should do like that. He did not explain much about it. He said we will be more benefited about when you do like this.
Yeah. So what happens if this kind of,
Raj, actually, I just want to add, my yoga teacher has taught us pranayam, and Om is a part of it also, which I do twice daily, every day. 10 times we are supposed to do this pranayam. I do it twice in a day, and Om is a part of this pranayam. Actually, we do it. He has told us 10 times. Now I will increase it. What you said, I will go by that also. I will add more value to it by doing it in a regular basis. It was just Om and then stopping, Om and then stopping. You need to do it 10 times. It takes about 3 minutes actually. I've seen that, 3 to 4 minutes. So 3 to 4 minutes in the morning, 3 to 4 minutes in the evening. When I do my pranayams, I do that. That's the last pranayam I do. So, and it gives a lot of your brain, your mind becomes cool. But what you said, I think it will be better. And what Sunilji also said, maybe depending on your problem, you can also stress on certain, A, U or Ma or silence, depending on your requirement also. You can also, I will do that also. But that is an added knowledge which I have now by talking to the group also. So thank you so much for everybody. Even Sunil Rastogi also, he also made me understand that all the yoga teachers are stressing on Om also. So thank you. It's a new learning.
I will only like to conclude by saying that since we are all engineers, we know that an inch of practice is worth a ton of theory, right? So let us practice. You will find automatically.
Correct.
So practice is better than theory, is what we all know.
This is right here.
Because we apply the laws of science.
We need to correct ourselves.
Absolutely. So on that count, it's 1:14 now. So let me close the session today. Yes. So let us chant Om this week, and let us come back next week and see whether we can. So just 10 minutes of chanting is what I recommend in the morning. Yes, Om.
We can
so on that
end
count,
the meeting with
of course,
Om.
There was a question from Sunil on Tat Sat.
Yeah, you can explain.
Om Tat Sat. Thank you. Thank you so much, guys.
Om Tat Sat.
Om Sat.
Om Tat Sat.
Om Tat Sat.
Thank you.